Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to my second video. I wanted to actually, I know in the previous video I had mentioned that I wanted to do a series on food and fruits, but before that, I wanted to take some time to go over like the basics because I feel like some of the things that I tried to explain in the previous video might go over some people's heads, especially like beginners, like, oh, why'd she curve this part like that? Why'd she shade this like that? So I wanted to do a beginner series on observation, shading, and textures, and I hope you enjoy. So this first video is going to be about the elements of art, which are basically the things that you should look out for in every observation, like whenever you're drawing. So I just wanted us to quickly cover them in this order. The first one is line. Pretty sure you've heard of most, if not all of these. The next is shape. Next is value. Form. Space. Texture. And color. So these are the 7. I'm sure if you did art in high school, you would know of some, if not all of them. And pardon the rough drawings, but I just wanted to use this to quickly illustrate what all these things are. And also, this is not like forced teaching. It's basically just going over the basics in the way I feel is as easy as possible to get you to basically understand what you need to know whenever you're drawing something. Because personally, I got into drawing because I loved making copies of what I saw in real life, and I didn't really know how to do that accurately, but I still enjoyed it anyway. So this is just to help you along and make sure you can have, some nice results. And also, lastly, keep in mind that I am not a professional, so these teachings might not be, something you can take to the bank, but it's something you can personally apply and they should work for you. So first of all, starting with line. Line is basically just connection between 2 points in space. And as you can see from this first line I've drawn, lines aren't always straight. There are different types of lines. It's a horizontal line. It can be vertical lines. Well, that's not completely vertical, but doing my best. There. Vertical. And diagonal lines. And like I mentioned before, not all the lines have to be straight. There are also curved lines. And you can combine lines to make stuff like zigzag or dashes with shorter lines. Things to keep in mind when working with line. Just choose the type of line you want. You can experiment with different types of lines in your drawings. And what I mean by different types is different weightings. You can clearly see that this line is thicker or heavier than the other one. And this is called a heavy line weighting, and this is called a light line weighting. And you can pick and choose if you want to interchange them or use just one throughout your drawing because they give different feels. And yeah, everything is actually made up of lines. I guess in painting, we call them strokes though. Let's move on to shape. Hold on, sorry. Line. And now, shape. So shapes are like a step up from line because they're basically like lines connected in different ways. In the case of a circle, the line starts and stops at the same point, circles and ellipses. Now, I guess you could argue that in most shapes they do that, but at least in other shapes you can see like where each line sort of forms a section, So yeah, shapes are made up of several lines. And apart from the normal regular shapes that you're taught in school, like the circle, the square, the rectangle, there are also irregular shapes. They can be made up of straight lines or curved lines or a combination of both. And if you notice, most things in real life that you see around you are not made of like completely regular shapes, but if you look hard enough, you can find the regular shapes in the irregular ones, like connected with smaller lines, stuff like that. So a shape is another thing to consider when making observations or wanting to draw a subject. 3, we're moving on to value. And value is basically the lightness or darkness of a subject. It's used to show shade So as you can see here, overlapping certain parts of the brush strokes makes them darker. And in painting, you can just choose, a different value without overlaying, but there are different methods of achieving that darker value. So value is basically showing the presence of or absence of light, which is shadow, in your drawing, and it helps to give, it helps to make your drawings look more 3D, which is where I move on to form. It's quite big now. Form. So form is also like an extension of shape, in that forms are a 3D method, like a 3D rendering of shape. And in this context, for example, let's use a sphere. I don't feel comfortable with the way these spheres are looking, so I'm just going to use the shape tool to quickly draw a sphere to show an example. And wait, hold on. Oh, that's better. So if you wanted this to be rendered to look like a sphere instead of a circle, the difference is value. And say our light source is the sun from here. The light rays would cast on this side of the sphere, right? So this side would be in light and this side would be in shadow because the light doesn't get there. And although I'm going to cover this more in detail in a later part of this series, I just wanted to depict it with a value. You can show the difference between 2D and 3D forms. And there you have it. It looks more like a sphere than this one, but it also looks like it's in harsh light because of the sharp distinction between the values that I used, which is another thing we'll cover later in this course. The distinction between your values. And there are different ways to show form. You might not necessarily use a pencil brush. Like if you were shading on paper, you would use a pencil, but there are different ways you can use that, which I will cover also in the next video, or one of the next videos in this series. And the next thing we will be touching on is space. And there's not really that much to say about space, but it's really how you make use of your canvas, for example, like wherever you're drawing, whether it's a digital canvas or on a canvas for painting, or on an actual piece of paper. So that's shape. And shape ties in with something else called composition very closely, because the way you make use of the space on your canvas will determine how balanced your final piece will look. So shape is also one of the things we will touch up on in detail. I wrote shape. Sorry, I meant to write space. There. So just keep in mind that it's how you use your medium, and also the relationship between the mediums, if there's space between them or not, how close everything is, how everything is arranged. So that's what space is. Next, we're moving to texture. And texture is what I would use to describe texture is the surface quality of an object. So basically, if something is smooth or rough or hard or soft or fluffy, scaly, texture is what you would use to depict that. And texture is usually helped to depict by forms and values, because when you manipulate the values on whatever you're drawing, it helps you to visualize, because texture is basically it shows where I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like, for example, if we have this wooden block, for example, and we wanted it to look like it was fluffy, for example, right? You would start by defining shapes and forms on it that would make it look fluffy, right? And it would slowly remove this rigid structure of a cube that we have here, because if you've noticed, I don't think I've ever seen any fluffy things that were in square form, even if it was cotton buds. They don't really come in square form. So just defining that. The reason why I'm trying to not make this part too much of a continuous curve is because of the corner that is still supposed to be there. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the to depict texture, you're gonna need to closely work with, I mean, all the elements, of course, but the main thing used to depict texture, I believe, is form and value, because the value is used to then show after you've depicted the form. It's used to enhance the form basically and show like where the light falls and everything, and that helps to like improve, your perception of what this is like in terms of 3D form. Also, notice that the type of lines I used while making this illustration were mostly soft, curved, or wavy lines. I tried not to use any straight lines, and I tried to make my lines light and spaced out to give the illusion of volume. But you can also achieve this look with heavy lines. I just didn't know how to do that. It looks more shaggy than woolly now, but I'm pretty sure you guys got the point of what I was trying to show, that using values in forms, in shapes and lines, basically everything, you can use them all to depict a certain texture, and it doesn't really have to look perfect. Also, another thing is that you can it's always good to trust the process. Like, I found that a lot of the time I've been impatient in drawing or rendering certain things, and I usually give up before like I've gotten everywhere, because well, those are the worries of a non-professional artist. But just keeping at it and continuing the process, actually I've noticed that whenever I do keep at it, it ends up better looking in the end. So yeah, I've learned to be patient with my drawings and just trust that it will turn out good. Okay, so I'm done. This is the best I can do for now, but that is the point of this series as well. I plan to, of course, the series is a both you and me improving thing. It's not just a you thing, because I'm also sort of bad at this, if you haven't noticed. So yeah, that's it for texture. basically using the previous elements and other elements not yet discussed to um, depict the nature of the surface of whatever you're drawing. And we'll go into detail on that later with more on observation, because obviously if you've never seen something before, you probably can't draw it just like the way that medieval artists drew giraffes and stuff like that. So yeah, this series is mostly going to be about observation, the way we observed the pineapple in the last video, and now we know how to draw pineapples. And the last element we're going to be talking about is color. Color doesn't really have a definition, an easy definition that I can break down here or that I know how to recite off the top of my head. But I'm pretty sure you know what color is. It could be described as different hues or like the separation of light when refracted through a glass prism and all that. So with color, there are basically three things that determine your final output. The first thing we have is the hue. And the hue is basically, it's sort of like what the color is deep down inside. Well, not deep down inside, but something like that, like your surface value. And hues are the things that the things that we're already used to, like the red, green, yellow, blue, you know, all the colors of the rainbow and all that. I'm just gonna stop here. But you could go on to add this. Yeah. So that's hue. And the next thing that affects color is the value, something we've also already talked about. And I will use red to demonstrate this. We'll start with the very saturated, or the normal red. And as we know, value is the lightness or darkness, so I'm just going to go along here and make it lighter. As you can see, nothing else about the color itself is changing, just the value, how light or dark it is. Here, it's getting darker, but it's still a very rich color. And if you notice, the extreme ends of the spectrum are white and black, but you don't really want to use complete white or complete black in your drawings because it's a pretty stark change from this. As you can see, like, it's easier in a drawing if you have red and you shade with this than if you had a red color, for example, and you just went ahead and started shading with black. Except if you were going for like a comic or pop art sort of look, then it's okay. And then lastly, we go to saturation. And the saturation is basically, okay, let's use saturation in humans, for example. I don't know. I mean, if you're hungry, you kind of feel not dead inside, but you feel sort of empty, sort of lacking. And not just saturation in terms of food, like saturation in terms of, you know, let's say being satisfied with a TV show. Let's use that word, lacking. So this is the core of red. Let's call it the core, right? It's its essence. And changing the saturation, well, I guess this is the max saturation that we can get since we've reached its core. But if you reduce the saturation, you're sort of like taking away like the essence of this color slowly, like sapping its life away. I don't know why is this analogy so depressing, but as you go on, it moves, as you can see, to become less and less colorful and closer towards a grayscale. Well, it still sort of eventually leads to black, but in a different way than this. As you can see here, the essence of the red is still quite present than here, where you move towards gray before the black. Here it's like, oh, they all have some form of red, but here it's like the red is dying. Oh my god. And like, although this came from like a red background, I just wanted to test something out. So just color picking, you can see that it's not as red as it looks here because colors are weird like that. It looks gray because the essence of this color, the red, has been sapped away. But when used closely with other reds, it appears red. So I'm gonna try the same color but on a blue. Wonder if they'll match up. Doubt it though. Nope, they didn't. But just note the colors are weird and they behave weirdly. So I know basically as much as you in this. And yeah, I hope that as we go on with this observation series, that we learn more about these elements of art and how to use them properly, and that we all improve. Okay, so a quick overview of what we covered in this video. First of all, line, the distance between 2 points. You can vary the weightings of the lines. There are different types of lines. Then shape can be seen as space enclosed by a line, lines meeting together, and so on. Value is the darkness or lightness used to show the presence or absence of light. Form is usually depicting things in a three-dimensional way by using value, shapes, and line. And space is the way you make use of your medium. Texture is the surface property of an object. Yeah. And color determined by three things: the hue, which is what I like to call the essence of the color, the value, that is the lightness or darkness once again, and the saturation, which I will call the life of the color. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one, where we go more into using these elements to properly observe and make an artwork. So thanks for watching, and if you liked it, please consider subscribing. Also, if you noticed something that if you feel I could have done something better in this video, please don't hesitate to comment down below what you think I could have improved on. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next one.